model here. Okay, this model is Dunwich as it was. So the yellow dotted line is the coastline now.
My goodness.
In actual fact, the coastline is slightly further back than when the model was made. So everything below is what was here, and everything above is what is still here. And if you look at the different colours of the backgrounds, you will find it's just a sort of representation of how quickly this has happened. This one, the first change of colour takes you down to about 1900. Then we go down to the 16th century, and then we go down to the 12th century, and you people are standing in the Romans and the Vikings and beyond. And between here, the coastline and the yellow dotted line is about half a mile, so that's how quick this has been. And erosion is happening at the rate of about a metre a year, which may not sound all that much, but it is. If you say 100 years, it's 100 metres. Some years it's a lot more, some years it's very little, but it's about a metre a year. So what we had here was the 6th largest town in England at one time.
Oh my goodness.
And the bit in the middle on the pale green is accurate. We know what was there because we've got maps and we've got plans, we've got stories and we've got pictures and all sorts. So we know that bit is accurate. And the bit below is a good guess. The bit on the yellowy background is a good guess. So why was it so big and affluent? The answer is that this was prime agricultural land. And so they could have cattle, sheep and all the products associated. They could have grain, they had timber, they had lots of lovely oak trees. They had fish and they had salt and they had honey, which was particularly important because it was the only sweetener they had then. And of course you could make it into mead. But probably most important of all was that there was a harbour, a natural harbour which was navigable to ships. And because they had oak trees and because they had a harbour, they used to build ships in Dunwich, which is quite an extraordinary idea that they could do that. And the sort of ships they built, right, a chap up there in the glass cabinet, which is a little oak ship, and it's about 177 feet long, so it's not inconsiderable. And what they did with their boats was they filled them up with produce from the land, and they exported up and down the coast and over to the continent, and they brought back lots and lots of lovely money. And that money was used to build churches because they believed that you could buy your way into heaven. So you've got 9 churches in here and 2 great big friaries, and that's a lot of godliness. And this one here, if you look at Blackfriars, you can see how big it was and how much land was associated. I mean, this is big money, we're talking big money. Greyfriars is still here, that's the lovely ruin you see on the way down the hill. If you came down that way with the lovely arch gateway, that's Greyfriars, but there isn't much of that left either. So what happened? What happened was, it was all happening and beautiful and affluent and so on, and then in 1286 there was a mighty storm, and the mighty storm took away a piece of the coastline, and it also started to silt up the harbour. And once the harbour was gone, they couldn't compete with the others up and down the coastline. But also, people didn't want to live here anymore. They were frightened it was going to happen again. The land was covered with salt, so the cattle didn't want it, nothing would grow on it, sheep wouldn't feed on it, and so on. So there was unemployment, there was starvation, there was fear, so people started to move away. And when people moved away, the erosion speeded up because there was no one to kind of keep a check on it. They used to do fancy things with bundles of faggots to try and keep the coast slightly more stable. When the people went, the erosion started to speed up, so bit by bit, it has been eroding, people have been moving away, and all of this is now lost. The further out you are, the flatter it was. This was a sort of incline. So I was just reading something in the local paper, the local freedom paper. They've been diving again, and they've come across further out, if anybody wants to read that, they're very welcome. Slightly further out, they've come across what could be bits of foundation further out. Further inland, what's happened is that churches and houses have fallen off the cliff, and when they fall off the cliff, the stones will either be nicked by the locals to be used for something else. So if you're walking around here and you see, for example, a stone wall, and you think, what's that odd-looking stone? It's probably part of a church, which somebody's picked up off the beach and thought, I'll have that, and used it. So that's where the stones go, or the sea will take the stones and will roll them until they disappear. These stones here are medieval church stones. If they're smooth, they've been underwater. If they're not, they haven't. So that's where the stones come from. But for the most part, there is very little out there because it's fallen over a cliff, the sea has squashed it to bits. But just to bring home to you how quick erosion can be, this is what usually startles people most. This church here, which is All Saints, It's what it looked like in 1776. You can see it was a big church, but it was already in disrepair because there weren't enough people to look after it and love it. People had moved away. And this is where we get to the photographs. This is what it looked like in 1903. So you can see it's quite big, but most of the structure is still there. I think that's the one that's got the intrepid ladies standing right next to the cliff as well. This is 1904, so going. And this is 1910. No intrepid ladies on that one. One of the others has got the intrepid ladies on it. So that's 1910, and here it is in 1919.
Oh my goodness.
Which is just the tower. And this is also 1919, which is the buttress from that tower, from that church. But the point is, about this, that from here to here is less than 20 years. That's how fast erosion can be. And all of that church is lost, it's gone completely. The only thing that's left is one gravestone left up on the cliff. And it is there, but please don't try and climb over the fence to have a look at it, because what's actually happened is that although the gravestone is there and the grass is there, it's all been undermined, so there's a sort of piece of grassy ledge with nothing underneath it, so please don't try and do it. But that's all that's left of that poor old church.